order. Coming up on February 2nd. Thank you, Kim. The first agenda item is for us to look at our board goals for the school year and to just have a conversation on how we're doing on each of them. Are we making the progress that we want to? Do we need to prioritize, deprioritize? But also, what do we need to make sure we're focusing on for the rest of this academic year to make sure we get done what we need to get done? So I'm just going to start at the top and work our way down and open up the conversation. The first focus area that we've identified was around academic achievement. Our goals were around continuing RAM, develop a plan for increasing preschool attendance in the district, and evaluate academic achievement programs for efficacy. So on the first one, RAM has been continued. We've seen some additional data on its use. Is there anything that we want to specifically add to that? Or, I mean, it's pretty broad, continue RAM, and we've continued RAM. I mean, the district has.
And we're evaluating it, right? Like
Yeah.
looking at changes and how can we tweak it. And
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we're doing that one.
I would say that we've kept it as part of the conversation as we've looked at some of the other changes to the, the school makeups, right? As we look at boundary changes and other thoughts, we've been continuing
Yes.
that conversation and making sure that we're not just gutting the staff at schools as we change everything, to make sure that we're still keeping the help in place where it needs it. And I think that's been an important part, to not forget it.
Yeah. So it stayed front and center in our planning and decision making.
Well, the budget will make it, the budget is going to affect it.
That's true.
So as we go through the budget.
And that way, but there's going to be budgetary pressures placed on it.
Agreed.
One thing I would add about it is the nice thing about having it in place, and I can tell you from internally working with our staff, is that it creates a systemic framework as the budget fluxes. If times are tight and we have to make reductions in there, there's a system to do it. So we've also talked with the elementary principals about then, when the budget recovers, there'll be a system to reinfuse staff in there, and it's not an arbitrary process, and that's something that they appreciate. And that's both for teaching staff, and I know you don't work with this one, but Chase and I work with it internally with the building administrators, but it's also for all of our support staff categories too.
Thank you. Anything else to add on that particular one? So we're continuing to have to focus, we need to focus especially on budget discussions. How about develop plan for increasing preschool attendance in the district? I mean, we've got the committee that's been meeting. We had an update from the group at the last board meeting. It feels like we're making some progress on that one. And when I chatted with Lori yesterday, I should just note for everyone that I did meet with her yesterday for an hour and a half, and we went through the goals, and I got her feedback, and I actually need to see if I've got notes from her on this particular one. She feels like the committee's working well and making progress and are on track. And actually, when we talk about next wave of FMP, that's perhaps if we're considering those preschool centers, that's the area in which we could put that kind of planning, was one of her ideas. So that one's great. We're making progress on that one. Anything else to add?
The only comment on that is I would make sure that as you kind of go through the process, that whatever we're putting into place is what folks are needing, right? That the community says, that is something I could take advantage of, or there's no way I could do that, right? We want to make sure that if we can think, this is a great thing to have a preschool center, and maybe that is I'm not sitting on the committee, so I'm not going to make judgment on it yet, but if it's the kind of thing where people are like, nope, we absolutely need something in our home schools, and then we get all on board, then we need to make sure we're doing that, right? I want to, because if the goal is to increase the attendance in it, that's not increase the availability of preschool, it's making sure that people are going to it and using it, because that's what's going to make the difference. So I want to just, as we go through the whole process, make sure that whatever the plan is something that people will use and increase the attendance in preschool.
Right, it needs to have that outcome. More kids in preschool, right? Yeah. That's good, thanks, Sean. And then what about this third one, evaluate academic achievement programs for efficacy?
So I know one of the things that we're doing right now, and necessity is the mother of invention, right? So as we're looking at the budget reduction process, we're having some tough conversations inside about, we have a tendency, and it's not just us as a district, I think it's education as a whole, of adding new things. JP, you can probably reflect on your time in the classroom, remember that. It's you add new things, and you add new things, and you add new things, but you don't take things away. Or you don't take it away completely because Steve really likes it, or Paul really likes it, or Sean really likes it, so we keep it and it's kind of going over there, but it's not, there's no, we don't have any effective implementation anymore because the scale's gotten too small. And so both at the district level and the building level, they're now starting to go back and really review where those are at. Some of those external contracts that you see, we're looking at where we have support contracts out there, and whether or not some of those programs are delivering what we want them to. And then from a funding standpoint, there's a couple things that they really wanted to do that we just weren't able to afford to do. And so they turned to the foundation for some support on a couple of those intervention programs. And the foundation's been pretty emphatic about delivering to them the rationale for why they should fund that program, and then looking for some outcome data on why it works. And so that's helping them put more of that together.
And kind of along that point, for me personally, the two biggest goals for us should be going forward curriculum and budget. And many times they're tied together. And we have to make sure that the curriculum is effective, it's producing the results we want, and it's economically sustainable. And when we've gone to an electronic means of delivery that has hard and fast renewal dates, we're locked into a budgetary situation where the screen's going to go black unless we renew it, as opposed to a book, which we can use it until we're in a situation where we can go forward with it. And we have spent a lot of time on other things that have been important, but I think it's vitally important for us as a board to get back to focusing on curriculum and on the budget, so we can do the things that we have in here as our goals and priorities.
Thanks, Phil. I want to focus on outcomes, and I think curriculum is a big component of that.
Oh, absolutely.
Ensuring that
Yeah.
we're developing students, closing opportunity gaps, helping every kid be successful, right? And curriculum's a giant, what we're teaching is a giant component of that. But I think, too, it's making sure we've got the right teachers who are trained and have the right background. I mean, it's just it's like everything we're doing, I think curriculum's huge, but these other components I think that we have focused on need to be in the mix around achieving, helping our students achieve, closing the opportunity gaps. I don't know, I'm not being very articulate, I don't think, but and the focus on academic achievement is super important, but right underneath it we've got equity, and then we've got career tech, which is actually a component of our curriculum. We've got a separate line item for curriculum. Maybe next year we can group our goals a little differently, maybe not so discreetly, because and have them. What I'd love to see is, here's our vision for what we want our district to be. Here are the dimensions that are critically important for developing our students in ways so they can be successful, and then have curriculum's a piece of that. Teachers are a part of that. Equity. I don't know. I'm making it up. It's just, yeah. And right now, I think the reason why we had that item on there was because we're doing lots of things and we don't always know, to your point, what's working, what's not working, and we need to see sort of those outcomes as we implement programs. And if they're not working, if it's not a good use of money, then we should, or it's not having the outcomes we want, we need to reevaluate. And being more explicit about that.
And I think, to just take a big picture standpoint, what is the outcome? There's a pretty good documentary out there, The Race to Nowhere, about these hyper-involved kids, overextended, AP classes, all the sports, and they're stressed and they're anxious and they don't have critical thinking skills. And what are we doing, right? So I think if we look at the big picture, and I see it, because I see some of these kids who come to the psych unit, right? And they're just overextended, and everything in their world says that's the right thing to do. They get lots of reinforcement for, yeah, more, overextend yourself, never take time. So sometimes I think taking a look at this big picture, like what outcome do we want?
Yeah.
Like what are we going for? And pushing back sometimes on saying maybe you shouldn't take 7 AP classes. Maybe that's not a healthy, like what are you really learning? Yeah. It's not just about content. And I think it's worth having that kind of discussion. Like what is the outcome? What do we want? I think high achievement is one piece, but work-life balance can be a piece. Being a good citizen can be a piece. Service-minded.
Exactly. Yeah, being strong, persistent, sort of social, emotional kinds of.
Resilient.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we don't get all caught up in what's the math book and how many AP classes can you take and how many sports can you go out for, but are we developing well-rounded citizens?
Yeah.
And healthy,
And
emotionally
also
healthy.
some customer experience too. So, at the Penn Listening Post, we had a long conversation about the Dreambox program that we're using for math intervention, and the kids were very, very, very vocal about how it pitches the ball where each of them individually need to hit it. So it's good to get that kind of feedback too, so that we understand what's making a difference, and then from a user experience, where do they feel the growth?
Well, and you'd say the same for Lexia too, because I've seen some crummy programs out there, but and
Yeah.
Dreambox too seem to be well designed. Kids are learning from it.
I think the term one boy used was, it doesn't feel like a punishment when I have to do the intervention, which I would prefer that they don't see intervention as punishment.
But that's great insight from a sixth grader, you said? So
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, please.
No, going to JP's point, I think as a district and board, our focus probably should be even narrower, because once our kids get to high school, it's a little bit too late. We need to make sure that our kids are, we're closing that opportunity gap in 3rd, 4th, 5th grades that we saw over years that really wasn't changing much. So continuing working with the administrative staff of getting that timely data, timely reports on what's being changed, what's happening, to ensure that our population of students, where that gap has been and has only grown over the last few years, we're doing something to address that, to make sure that we're starting to see that shrink. Because then we'll still see the same population of kids as they go and end up in those high achieving AP courses, and a lot of our kids end up being left behind. And it's typically children of color.
Right.
I was going to add, I'm sitting on the curriculum review right now, and we're doing 2 this year, and I think we have another meeting next Wednesday, but you're sitting in there with kind of the content experts, right? So we have a language arts review and then a library curriculum review. So we've got a lot of language arts teachers in the room. And I tell you, as I sit there and listen to it, sort of as the outsider, the non-educator, they really own it, right? They really feel what works and what doesn't. And that's part of the exercise in the curriculum review, is identifying what the barriers are that they need to address to be more effective, and then what things are working and how they can increase that. And it's a pretty interesting conversation listening to how, they've addressed within the context of, say, language arts, all of the things we talk about at a very high level across the board. And I think that's a very useful tool to, as we look at from that high level, have these smaller groups that really know that area, try and target, okay, what can I fix in this piece? And these folks are looking at what can I fix in this piece. I think it's great. I think the downside of that is, right, the curriculum review process is scattered across many, many years. And so this year it's targeting very couple specific things, and then it doesn't get looked at again for a while, several years, right? So as a whole process, it's kind of lengthy, but I think when they're sitting in that room, usually in this room, all together, I think they're very attuned to the things that need to get improved upon and things that just need to be changed. And so I've enjoyed that process of it, because it's given me a whole different vantage point.
Yeah, that's great. Do they talk about their students' experience? Back to your point of the Penn kids, so this doesn't feel like punishment, thank goodness. I mean, do we do surveys of students on?
We don't do surveys with students right now. What they're getting is, and part of it's our implementation of the TLC program, is that we've got the ability to have some of our staff working directly through the instructional leadership teams to gather that data on a building-by-building basis from their anecdotal work with the kids, so that they better understand what that end-user experience feels like.
I mean, had we talked about doing like a student survey or a student engagement survey? Would that
We-
also get at that?
Exactly, and that's part of that work that we're doing with ICAD, the University of Iowa, the Chamber is, in Southeast actually is one of our schools that does some student engagement survey piece, and so when I was out there working with their faculty a couple weeks ago, they've actually volunteered if we get one rolling, they would like to pilot it.
Okay.
For us, but Kristen and I are working on that right now. We've found a couple of nice national tools that are out there. We're concerned they're a little lengthy, and so we'd like to do some piloting, but boy, if we could get some of that feedback from the students, it's not only about, to Phil's point earlier, what is taught, but also how it's taught, and when I feel engaged when I'm in school, what are those actual
Yeah.
things and expectations that teachers set for me that we do in class and outside of class that really actually get me fired up and ready to learn.
I think that would be fantastic feedback. I mean, I get to.
There are students that sit on that curriculum review.
Oh, good, okay.
Yes.
And I tell you, a lot of times peers aren't always great about paying attention and listening to each other because you get side conversations. When the students are talking, everybody's listening.
That's fantastic, good.
And I have not yet seen what I sort of expect to see, which is the student will say, well, I don't like this because of ... And then all the teachers are like, well, let me explain it away for you.
Uh-huh.
This is why it's like that. They're like, you're right, that's terrible. Let's figure out how to fix
That's
it.
great.
It's
That's
been
good.
very reactive, and I've been impressed with that
That's
because
good.
it's, as the adult, it's really easy to say, well, you're a kid and you don't understand, so
understand,
this
yeah.
is why we do it that way. And it's, I have yet to see that through the two
That's
different
fantastic,
reviews,
that's
so
really good.
pleased with that.
See if we can say we're making progress there.
Yeah, that's good, I agree. And so, and we can also, we'll add in the efficacy review as we do budget work, obviously, to Phil's earlier point as well. And then getting these active student engagement data into the mix too will help us. Equity, moving on, increase the number of teachers and administrators of color by 20%. I think you just reported that from an admin standpoint, we've hit the 38% mark.
And that's just for this year's hire.
For this year. I don't know where we are in terms of increasing the number of teachers of color.
And I think that's coming to the board in February.
Okay.
March.
March,
March.
starting. Thank you, Chase.
But, well, we're gonna take a look back, right? But I think that with the conversation we had at the work session on Tuesday night and where we are with the budget, it would be unrealistic for us to expect those same gains this spring just because we're going to have, we're in a hiring freeze.
Exactly.
Now, we might increase the diversity of our workforce, and the percentage of new hires for diverse workforce might look really good if we just put a percentage up there. But if we look behind those numbers, it's kind of, a paper facade, because we only go out and hire 7 teachers, and we target diversity hires, and so 5 of those 7 are diverse candidates. That'll be a really high percentage, but when we add it into the total landscape, and so I think we just need to be
Yeah.
transparent about that conversation. We're also gonna choose some of our strategies, so we're
Yes.
optimistic and very excited about the long term.
Yeah.
The budget and the hiring freeze just really,
Yep.
made my excitement colder than the weather last week.
Yeah. No, I
So,
get it.
it's,
But that's something I know we discussed in the last session a little bit too, around the visibility of the strategies and the approaches you're
that's-
taking for both recruitment, but also the retention piece
They're
as
gonna
well.
be front and center for you all
Yeah,
next
that's,
month.
both pieces together would be fantastic, thank you. We had make gains on the climate survey in the areas of highest opportunity. When do we resurvey, or when do we get the results?
We do that in May, and we've already released those results. I'll push those out to you again, so that they're out on the website. But yeah, let me push those, I'll push the survey results out to you. I can tell you that real quickly, what we did this time, which is different than last time, is we actually gathered all the longitudinal data. In the past, what they've always done is they've said, here's where you are this year, and this is what happened last year. But now that we've been doing it for multiple years, we're actually able to go back and then stack the question results on top of each other, so we can look at it and say, how do we look when we started, and how do we look today? I'll tell you that, and I shared this with the admin team when we looked at it, the area where we still struggle the most, JP, you're gonna be shocked, the area that we struggle the most is staff satisfaction and professional development. We just struggle since we've been doing it, we struggle to get over 2/3 of the staff satisfied. And I know part of the problem is when you do whole staff development and you're talking about 1,200 teachers and you're trying to come up with a set of work to do that meets the needs of all 1,200, it's just tough to do. I think we're making strides in it, but that's our biggest challenge area. I think when you see the data, you'll see that the other trends are moving in the right direction.
So don't we usually get a board item on that, or what am I not remembering? I'm thinking like,
Yeah, we have presented it at the board in the past, so let's go back and look, but I'll make sure that you actually get the survey right now, and then if we want to get it out on the board agenda after you've had a chance to take a look at it.
Because we
we're
had a
happy to
big
do that.
concern around LGBTQ and
Yeah.
the students not
We looked
being
at it in the
safe.
fall.
Well, part of it though, keep in mind, is that some of the information now, the University of Iowa Public Policy Research Project has subsumed some of that work for us, and so some of those things are now in those 11 longitudinal reports that we get from UI.
Okay.
So, but I'll get a copy of it out to you, you can take a look at it, and we can certainly get that on the board agenda.
So Steve, on the PD piece, I guess it's always been my thought that teachers really prefer choice and a
Mhm.
menu of items, and I think that's like popular on the the days when they can go in and there's some lots of different choices. Those seem to be really popular.
Yeah, we do that on one of the 4 days before school starts, and then we do it on our October day.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm really proud to say that we've now gotten to the point where we usually get too many proposals from staff, and they actually have to go through and select. Before, it was kind of like pulling teeth to get people to present, and now that the momentum is there, now people want to present, they want to share with their peers. Some of the things that we put out there turn out to be wildly popular, and we have to ask the teacher presenter if they'd be willing to do 2 or 3 sessions, which is great. They struggle with that because they want to be participating in sessions too. And you're right, those are, and I think if you were to break that down, and the survey doesn't do that, but I think in my work with the ICEA, I think one of the real areas of frustration isn't reflected in that. It has to do with our Thursday early outs.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
So is it
I think
time?
that 2/3 that's in there, I'd be willing to bet that that's
Well-
people that are frustrated with Thursdays.
What do you do in that amount of time? You can't travel.
If you're at Hills or you're at Penn and you want to meet with other 3rd grade teachers, you're going to be in the car for a minimum of 10 to 15 minutes to get somewhere to meet with somebody. And
For 10 or 15 minutes.
Right, because then you've run out of time. And so there's a real level of frustration with that. They've worked to try to use technology. They've done some AV conferencing so that they can at least see each other, but they would prefer to be with each other. We've actually resorted to, in some cases, where we used to do things as a district as a whole, just said, do it in your building, which is great if you're at Garner,
Or
where they have
West,
4
secondary.
3rd grade teachers.
Right.
But if you're at Hills and you're the only 3rd grade teacher, how do you have a Gray Light meeting? You can't
So-
do that.
Is it time to revisit early outs and have more half days?
I think it is, and I say that based on about 2 years' worth of dialogue with ICEA through our leadership meetings. We've talked about either a full-day model or a half-day model. We've looked at the total number of hours. It's about 30 collectively, so if you think about that, that's the same as 5 school days or 10 half-days, and so we've talked about that. We've talked, because we've got some crossover with people who are on the calendar committee, could we set that up so that it's a family-friendly schedule? Thursday is not a very family-friendly schedule from that standpoint. If you're a family that has to deal with childcare, it might be easier if you had a half-a-day Monday morning or a half-a-day Friday afternoon or before or after a break kind of thing. So we've had those kind of conversations too.
Do you think?
I think it is. I think
Because
it's-
that's where it's ICEA, right?
Yep.
And
And they're definitely open to it. I will tell you, when I do the staff listening posts, it comes up at least 50% of the time.
so then what would be a next step on that? Because I think you're right. I think that's going to get that PD number way. I mean, it'll be, because right now I don't think it's very valuable. And so
Right.
it's not,
Right.
why do it? It's not very
I
effective.
thought I read that some district near here was doing it or was proposing doing like a 1 day off a month instead of early outs
Yeah,
for that reason, and
we've
college
talked
community or some.
Well, we've talked about it through the, both through the
Remember.
UEN and through the AEA superintendent's group. And part of it's because I've had experience doing it. In the last district I was in, we went from early outs to half days to full days. And we had 5 full days, and if you think about that, we're in school during 9 months of the year, and so then we just spread those out. Part of our conversation right now is we've got some, it's like everything, right? You've got some people who love it, some people who hate it. We've got some people who love the half days idea. We've got some people that love the early out ideas. We've got some people that are over here and they'd love to go to full days on it. And, I would say that there just hasn't been enough momentum to confront the fact that there's probably not a one solution that fits all. So I
But we
think
need to
just-
make a change
just need to
because
push
it's a serious point. You said 50% of your listening posts, it comes up.
Yeah, and it'd be, yeah, maybe have some, you know, I
And the
just
other
think-
thing, sorry to interrupt, but one of the other things that's a real struggle too is because of our schedule right now. So we used to have elementary lived inside the secondary day. Now that you have elementary and secondary, I talked about how hard it is for the 3rd grade teachers to meet. It's almost impossible for the art teachers to meet. Because if you have an early out, your elementary art teachers get out here.
Yeah.
By the time that they're ready to get done with their workday, the secondary art teachers have just gotten out. So they're, right now, our specials as a K-12 team are meeting twice a year. And they are very frustrated with it.
So maybe it is time to,
Yeah.
come up with some options.
And I think what we probably
All
need to
people,
do
pick
is,
the one that's most, knowing not everyone's gonna love everyone.
and I think we need to engage our community too, because this will be a structural change for them and things like childcare and those types of things. We'll need to engage with our ESP programs and make sure that they're on board with
Yeah,
this, because
that's right.
there'll be some connection there. But I know that, like I said, it's one of those things that's been on our ICA leadership meeting agendas on and off for at least a couple of years. It just hasn't risen to the level where we've said, let's,
So we've set the
Move on.
calendars for next year, obviously.
We have.
So the opportunity really to make a change would be for the next school year.
But maybe this year's the time to talk about it.
Yeah.
I was gonna
Yes,
say,
right, that's
because
what- yeah.
that gives us lots of lead time for parents.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important for us to keep in mind.
So looking at the 20,
20-year.
2021. What's the deadline for getting that calendar for 2020?
We always do 3 years of rolling calendars, so essentially, we've already talked to the calendar committee and said, what if? And it's really, and they've actually mocked up, did we do full, Kim, or did we just do halves? Yeah, we did mock up for halves for what it might look like. So they're actually, we give them the direction, make a calendar that has these parameters to
So
it.
could we give them direction to maybe mock up a full option too,
Yeah.
and then evaluate
Yeah.
what
Great.
those two look like? So that goes to the calendar committee?
Yep, and then I can bring that back to you after we get those done.
That's
Great,
great,
thank you.
fantastic. That's really good, thank you for that conversation. The last one in equity was develop and implement phase 1 of elementary equity and integration plan. I think we did that, didn't we? With the,
Yes,
November
so that's
27th
part
vote?
of, and that's what JP was referring to, that right now they're going through and revising the equity plan. So I think that's,
I thought that was I was thinking that was our changing of the elementary boundaries and.
oh, okay.
But that also would be a piece of it too.
It is a piece of it, and maybe we should specifically, I think we should, can we add that? I mean, I think that could be a specific,
The,
you know,
the equity committees
yeah, comprehensive.
revising
plan.
their.
I don't know how to.
Yeah, they're revising their comprehensive equity plan is what they're doing, isn't
It is, yes, and
Yep.
so continue to monitor and support the revision of the comprehensive equity plan.
And get that reported out so that, because it's in phase 1 now of the redrafting
Yeah.
process.
And that'll
So
Get
why
that
don't you
part of
say
the board.
monitor and
be support.
the revised comprehensive equity plan. When did you see that?
It's the first draft we just saw last night,
Yep.
and so Laura wants to get as many eyes and input on that as possible to have that ready for next year.
That when the board, will we get a chance to review it?
Yeah.
Or look at it, or see?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking, I mean, the equity committee was kind of asking last night, because what they were doing, right, all last year was, we're gonna come at a certain meeting, and it eventually became a work session and sort of monitor the plan.
Yeah,
So now it's sort of like, well, what does that look like, since we don't have a plan right now, we're changing it, and so,
this may be a work session that we want to have an agenda item for.
I would think so.
yes, and just on that, I think it'd be great, either to do it there, or even at a public board meeting for
Oh,
the
yeah, fair
committee
enough.
to introduce.
Yeah,
I'd like to do the work here, I think it's more
And
but
effective.
have them presented at a board meeting.
Or even just show up and, because there's not much to present right now, right? It's very rough draft. So
Okay.
we want to be, but we want to see it to input. But then publicly, I think it'd be nice for us to meet the equity committee, the new.
Oh, I see what you're
members,
saying.
yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah,
And
yeah.
that would be a good to
Got it.
do on YouTube or whatever.
When do you think is the right time for that? Just
I'll
curious.
Check with them and see where they're at.
check with them and see, yeah, I know, because Chase has, the hiring stuff is in March, and I think that it has its own focus that needs to, and is gonna take some time and be worthwhile. So let's check with them and kind of
Okay.
see what would be good.
Okay, that sounds good. Anything else on the equity focus area? Career Tech Ed, advanced career tech offerings across all junior high and high schools. We made progress on that. And then, I know that there was some work being done, I think it was Matt that was leading the pathway work.
Right, so now one of the things that you'll see in the program of studies is we've got the career pathways in there, so it's all the way from what coursework do you need here to what potential jobs are out there in the end, and, does this require college, community college, VOTEC, apprenticeship, what do you need to get to move into that type of position?
So as students have been registering, then they would have seen those pathways, and
They're
the
in-
counselors would have discussed that with them
Yep.
too?
Yep, so they're in the program of studies now, so that it's not a standalone document.
Got
We decided that as a standalone document, people just weren't accessing it, so
Yeah.
now it's right there in the program of studies, so you can see it. And it is part of the conversation that the
Yeah.
counselors have when they go into the classrooms to talk to the students as they get ready to register.
Yeah, I think we still have challenges, though, with aligning with the regional center and our curriculum in the regional center, as far as there should be prerequisites before taking advanced manufacturing. You should be able to read a tape measure before you're trying to program a CNC machine. I know we had the discussion out at West High about aligning things that way, so I think there's still opportunities for us to do that. And we've got to work too with more connections with business.
Yeah.
Schools that are doing that are having phenomenal success. And the governor, with the Job Ready or Work Ready Iowa initiative, working to encourage apprenticeships and things like that. Many schools are doing pre-apprenticeship programs. And at a K-12, that's what you do, because to be an apprentice, you have to be 18 years of age. So anything we would talk about here as far as apprenticeship programming, we can show them that pathway, but we can actually do pre-apprenticeship programming here in our schools, as long as we put the pre on it. And I would like to see us, put as a goal to work toward getting pre-apprenticeship programming started here. I know the Carpenters Union has a curriculum and all kinds of things ready to go that way. We've got there's great partners. We take our kids every year up to the Steam Fitters Union facility up in Cedar Rapids, which has 16 different trade unions there that way. And I recognize we're under a budget situation, but I think as a district we have to look at getting those curricular choices that meet a 5-minute bell schedule in our buildings where we have control over it. And the cost of going to the regional center is expensive for us. Transportation, the cost of the curriculum, everything like that. Having it at our building level where we can control it and things like that, and students have a chance to explore more, I think that that's something that should be always in our mind, as far as, I don't know about putting it in as a goal, but I think that's important, and Steve has alluded to in our conversations that there, a certain amount of this curriculum is required by, the state that we offer this. And we always want, and I'd like to think, we like to see ourselves as leaders in a lot of fields. I'd like to see us look at that. Our ag offering was recognized by the Secretary of Ag coming here and speaking in our building. And I think that that's significant, and we need to work on offering those opportunities for our students that way.
So I actually like the idea of the goal around working with the business community to provide some kind of opportunity. So whether it's, plumbing or steam fitters or.
Right.
But in other kinds of businesses.
Well,
in
AC,
important-
don't limit it just to the trades. You're absolutely right.
But I think there's a real goal there, and we have been chatting with ICAD, and they're very keen on this. I mean, around trying to find a way to harness the power of our business community and working community here, because they're hungry for talent. They want to make sure that we're teaching the skills that they're going to need for the jobs that they have, and it's all around our region, all kinds of jobs, right?
Right.
And I think we could find ways, they would want to partner with us.
Absolutely.
This is what we're hearing from ICANN anyway, that business community is hungry for that relationship with the school district.
Absolutely,
To create
and
these opportunities.
I think I shared with the board some articles, and if I haven't, I thought I did, where even at some schools, right now, we'll have a big media presence if a student gets an athletic scholarship to go to a college. Well, some areas, they're having a big signing day for
Yeah.
kids that go into an apprenticeship program.
Sure.
The same type of thing, applauding that, because that's a job. And there's also many schools, and I think, there again, I'm going to put in a big plug for Des Moines Central Campus, and you can go to their website and look at what they're doing there. But they have direct class partnerships with businesses. And students that are in those programs before graduation have a job lined up. And they have no trouble with getting students taking those programming. And there was a great article about a small district that had an ag program that had a 440% increase in their student participation, and the instructor got the STEM award for his region because of their connection to the business, and that students had a direct funnel into that.
Well, I think we should just add that, a bullet point, because it's not there, about partnerships with businesses and
ICANN
trades.
and business and trade.
I just
yeah.
think that, I do think that's an opportunity. I think it's a good synergy for everybody.
And Mark Nolte was in.
Along that, could we add exploring the opportunities of pre-apprenticeship
Sure.
programming?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I think that's well, so why don't we put that in the things we will do to support the folk, like explore, because that's a more specific. So
Okay.
if we say the goal is the partnership with our community, businesses and whomever, and then one of the activities
Okay.
could be to explore pre-apprenticeship. And we've already got explore CT approaches in other districts. And so I think we should continue to do that and look at what they're doing to.
That's good. I'll add it. And I think, Mark Nolte was planning to come to the board meeting on the 22nd to talk about this.
Great.
At community con, of course, we canceled that board meeting or pushed it to the 29th. But, so we've got receptive business community to advance the school yet this school year. So I think adding it makes a ton of sense.
I was just gonna say, I don't think we have to necessarily go out and hunt it down. I think we
No,
just
I don't
have to.
we're
think-
begging
Yes.
for
I think we
it.
just have to open the door.
The thing
Yeah.
with them is they're couching it all as innovation.
Right.
And I'm having a little bit of heartburn with just calling it innovation, because I don't know, I've been through too many setups of new innovation programs, and often it's just kind of chase the shiny object and implement something and doesn't have the efficacy or the outcomes that you're looking for, and some of the stuff that they're like asking for isn't really innovative. I mean, you mentioned the school in Des Moines. People have been doing these kinds of apprenticeship programs and business relationships with schools for a long time. I don't see it as innovation. I think it's more around the goals that we want our students to be good, productive citizens. I mean, and this is a means of doing that, right? Is
Well,
getting them outside the classroom and working
yeah.
on real life skills and stuff like that.
And knowing, preparing them for the jobs that are
Yeah,
out there.
exactly.
And not the jobs that were there 10 years ago.
Well, and like I
Yeah.
say, I encourage people to look at Central Campus. They have a program where they take worn-out squad cars, and I believe it's with Raytheon. And students actually refurbish patrol cars. It's an actual business that is working in the school, and they put in all new electronics, they rebuild the vehicle, and then that goes out. And those kids, they can go work for Raytheon after
Yeah,
they
that's
graduate
fantastic.
doing the exact same work, so.
Yeah, that's fantastic. No, that's good. So that one feels really good. That was a very good one. And I'm hoping Mark comes to our next board meeting and then we can get ourselves, it's kind of Steve Wyan was looking for that, what's the
Yep.
vision and redoing
Yep.
the mission, because it's such a.
Where are we going and what are we doing?
Yeah, and then we can start hooking these kinds of initiatives to that more directly. Okay, curriculum. Implement ethnic studies course, it was in the, kids are registering for it. Implement ag course, kids are registering for that. We heard at the work session on Tuesday, how the counselors had been promoting those courses and that kind of thing. So I think we did those, and then evaluate infusing life skills programming into the district. I wonder if that's kind of related to that last conversation a little bit.
And I, with reviewing this, I was struggling looking at that one, what we really had done to those ends. And sometimes, and I remember when Sean brought it up when we first were discussing this, that some districts will have short courses kind of in that Christmas break area where they teach everyone how to change a tire, jump start a vehicle, it's just some practical life skills. But I think too, life skills, we have to look at contracts, buying a house, rental agreements,
And
those.
some of that, so the legislature is talking about.
Right, and there is some financial financial literacy programming that has and that, so but there was a very good article written by a student in a Cedar Rapids paper, as a 15-year-old, and was saying, it says, look, I'm taking all, it was a young lady, look, I'm taking all these courses, but I still don't know what I need to do to buy a house. I don't know nothing about mortgages. I know nothing about some of these everyday life things once I leave school.
You know what I've seen more and more? Kids don't have a signature.
Well,
They don't know how to sign.
if you want to get into the discussion on writing
I see it
and
so often,
cursive,
they're like printing and like
I
they're
think that's a
getting
millennial anti-theft device, isn't it?
A signature?
A signature.
Like a manual?
Manual transmission as well, but no,
I just think some of these things, and they could be really small, right? It's not like you have to have a full year course
Correct.
or anything. It could be
right.
a unit inside of something.
Or
Yeah.
I took class, when my daughter was at City in her AP English course, they took part of these same conversations, learning how to sign. That was
Yeah.
part of the requirement of when you typed up your paper, you had to sign it and
Yes.
turn it in. So it's ways that we can evaluate whether or not we are taking those small pieces and already infusing it into the curriculum that we have present, not necessarily because we're facing budget crunch.
Yeah, right.
Figuring out
Yeah,
ways
you don't
that
need a
we
whole
can
course.
take these life
Well,
skills and impart them into the courses that's already being offered.
But we
Didn't
wanna
I'm
be-
thinking, they did put the bill through to, it's been proposed to delay the requirement for financial literacy to incoming freshmen. So they gave it a bit of time instead of next year, right?
Right.
So I think that's good. I'm wondering, no, we do not have to create its own standalone course, but if we have the time, is there a reason not to at least explore that? I mean, financial literacy could be part of it, but if that's going to be the requirement, and we want our kids to learn some of the other stuff also, if we embed it all together in something that becomes a requirement,
They're
we're
actually-
making sure it's getting there, but,
Yep,
and we got a
that's
little
what
bit of time to do
That's what the
it.
curriculum team is doing, because they went into full-scale panic thinking that it had to apply to next year's seniors, and so,
Does it?
well, right now it does.
Currently it does.
But I think that bill is gonna go through, and the plus for that is that rather than kind of sticking a Band-Aid on it, they'll actually be able to do the systemic work that you're doing right now, because the challenge we have is that the legislation is written for the majority of school districts in the state. They run on semesters and we run on trimesters, and so right now you either take 2 trimesters of Gov and 1 trimester of Econ, or you take AP Econ and AP US History combo. And if you're in that AP History, AP Econ combo, you've got none of the personal finance. If you're in the Gov Econ segment, you've got some of it, but not all of it. And so they're trying to put some kind of Band-Aid together for kids who will be seniors next year, who would not have an opportunity to schedule into it. And then also trying to do the more systemic work that you talked about, is what should the curriculum look like over time? Because the state requirement is a semester of government and a semester of now economics infused with personal finance. And so we're just struggling with how do you take 3 trimesters and have it meet a requirement that the state has for 2 semesters. So systemically, they're trying to fix it. The benefit would be that if they do delay it, I think they'll do a better job of figuring out how to put those 2 together.
Don't we know, well, we won't know until they do session and look at
It made it through the House. No, I'm sorry, it made it through the Senate. And it's in the House. They thought they were gonna take it up this week. I think
Okay.
the weather complicated that, so we're hoping they take it up next week.
that. All right, we'll watch that closely, and that would help with this item to point, being able to be more explicit about putting those skills in. Anything else on this one?
Just one thing, I keep beating this drum, and I like evaluate infusing. I think it's good, because I'd like to evaluate infusing social and emotional curriculum.
Oh,
Just think that, because again, I think we assume kids know this stuff, and sometimes it's a skill. Like being happy is a skill.
and you can help develop that.
I'm sorry if I'm a little naive
Yeah.
on exactly what, can you just,
So in kindergarten, it's sharing.
okay.
It's how to play well with others.
Sure.
From what I see, it's how do you like yourself? What is your dream? What's good about you? How do you have empathy for somebody else, right? So this is anti-bullying curriculum, this is self-esteem, this is mental health, prevention, right? So, I think in elementary school we do a pretty good job because we're teaching kids how to get along with one another. I think we assume once they get to junior high and high school, they don't really need to learn that stuff, but it's, and the worst case scenario is the suicide epidemic and the opioid crisis. I mean, those things stem from people not having good social emotional skills. So, again, we probably don't need a whole class, but
Does that relate at all with like the mindfulness?
yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
Right.
that.
Yes,
that-
mindfulness is that's the pocket that this is in, absolutely.
It's a great approach. I mean, we
So-
mentioned resilience earlier.
Resilience,
What do you do when you get a bad
that's a
grade?
big one.
Don't
Yeah,
fall
what do you do when you
apart.
get a bad grade?
Yeah.
Like literally, you see kids who attempt suicide. It just happened last week. The kid who got his phone taken away and went out and jumped off a water tower because his parents took his phone away.
Can you imagine?
They were trying to discipline him, and I just met a guy last night who knew the family. Good kid, good family, and they took his phone away, and they don't know if he fell or if he jumped, but he went and climbed a tower in the freezing cold. And so, I think it's like if it's sex ed or whatever. Like sometimes if it's not happening out in the world, parents can't do it all. Like it falls to us again, just infusing that into our curriculum so that it's the fabric of what we do. And I know it happens. I know it's like the signature. Some of this stuff happens already, but it's not systemic.
Right.
It's not happening everywhere. And the problem with that is, and again, it's easier at the elementary because you got one teacher for the whole class, and they know those kids really well. Well, at the secondary level, you got 8 teachers. Kids fall through the gaps all the time who are struggling with this stuff. So if we just make it our culture, again, I just think that's.
I
So-
think it's a great, and I've added it as a
Okay.
new bullet under there, and evaluate using SEL. Okay, moving to special education.
So on the first one, I'll just point this out. So what we have done as a district, or what Lisa has said is, we're just going by the law, right, chapter 103. So there is a group of people, a committee, that is proposing changes to chapter 103. And so I think it's going to be really important for us to, there's going to be a presentation on that at the CDD on February 9th at 10 a.m. to 11:30. It's a group, I'm interested to see what they say, because I come at this from applied behavior analysis, and some of the folks that are changing these laws probably have, it'll be interesting to see what they have. So it's Disability Rights Iowa and some other groups. So it's lawyers. So I'm always a little, when lawyers are going to tell, I just want to make sure there's not just lawyers, right? But it looks like they're going to they're going to propose some big changes to chapter 103. So we need to keep an eye on that.
So we need to monitor,
Yeah, we're going to need to monitor that, and then
to chapter 103, you said?
103. And it is it doesn't really deal. It's more about discipline, and so I think they're going to bring it. They're going to talk about seclusion restraint more specifically and have some guidelines and outlines for that. So that's going to be important to monitor.
Okay. And then was someone saying something? Sorry. Continue support and training for teachers and paraeducators. Lisa's been, coming and giving us updates. Is that progressing, do you think?
Yep, ongoing. There's both the process for teachers who are new to the district, and then for our experienced teachers, and also for our support staff.
And we did adopt a much better. So before we did CPI, that's like what I'm trained in, which is, it's fine, but it's often, I've been in a gym with 70 people and 3 trainers, and it was like, check the box and move on. So this training requires a better teacher to trainee ratio, and it's more robust. It's more expensive, but it's much more robust, and it's more useful.
Good.
We looked at, on demographic reports recently, and we've seen this decline in students receiving special education support, or less kids.
So
why is it going down?
Yep, so one of the things that we discovered, and this was 5 years ago now, was that we did a really good job working with the RAEA partners to identify students who had special education needs and then get them into special education programming, but our reevaluation process was not real good, and so we had kids that they got out of special ed when they graduated from high school, not when they no longer needed services. And so we sat down with the AEA, we went through a really aggressive process where we said, what does our annual evaluation cycle for each child look like, and do we have clear-cut exit strategies for kids? And we didn't, and so we put those in play with them, and so we had a lot of kids, especially through the special ed process, they're level 1 eligible students who were in special education but should have been regular ed students, and so we worked with them through that IEP process. And so I think what you've seen over that period of time is the students who are in our special ed program are students that genuinely need a high level of service, and they need that support, and we're able to provide that for them. But for those students who are better served in their least restrictive environment, we're now doing a better job of that. So you see fewer kids in it. We're not the only district across the state. I think if you look at states who have gone through this process with their AEA and the State Department of Ed, you're seeing the numbers go down. So right now, we just talked about this at the UAN meeting because we were looking at all the districts and looking at the numbers, and you could literally almost go through and identify the districts that have been through that process and the districts who had not yet gotten there, because the disparity is usually in the 4 to 5% range in some cases. Or here or there here.
I would say ask, I guess, because when you look at it as a chart of this is how many kids are in it, and it's just going down, that doesn't paint the picture, right? It just looks like we're not serving kids anymore, right, from the outside looking in. And what we do see, it sounds like it's more of a similar thing to ELL students, like they're only in the program for 1, 2, 3, 4 years, right, before they no longer need it. I think if we could see that type of data, if students are in special ed program for, K-12, or it's 5 years or 4 or 3, and kind of see how that trend has changed over time. I think that paints a different picture, not the whole picture either, but more so than just, here's the number that we have. Because every time I see it, that it's going down, I'm like, why is it going, it doesn't
We need a
make
bit
sense
more
to me in
story
that
there.
context.
Let me see if I can get, Lisa can pull some of those numbers from the state.
Yeah.
And it's always worth monitoring too, if, it's like if the meds are working, we're gonna stop taking them. So sometimes the interventions are working, so the kid is doing really well, and we pull the interventions, and I think monitoring.
Right.
Because sometimes they fall off, and it's like, I was doing really great on that IEP, and I don't have that IEP anymore, and now
Mhm.
I'm not doing so great. And so, just making sure, that we catch those gray areas.
I agree, and I think that's kind of part of my hesitation, just looking at the number of kids that are in it. If the answer is maybe we're better identifying when kids should be out of it, what's the data that shows we're better identifying it? Because if we're just identifying kids that are no longer needing services, how do we know that that's accurate? And I'd like to look at that a little bit more and make sure we're doing that appropriately. Because that is a valid point. I know it's like, oh, we're all good now.
Well, and also, when the OCR came in, and because we had disproportionality, specifically African American kids, they had some data that shows if you're in special ed, you are worse off than if you're not, specifically for African American kids, and we had to clean that up, and so I think that some of that, I think, is an ongoing process of evaluating how we decide, and yeah, I used to say, oh, you're in BD, you've been a teacher in 4th grade, and you're in BD until you're in 12th grade, and so.
Well, and there's a community member that's always come to me on that BD situation and said that when a kid is classified as BD in elementary school, there should be, you should have a reevaluation going into junior high. You should have a reevaluation going from junior high to high school. So it's not that this follows you forever.
Well,
And I mean, at a state level, we're looking to give felons their voting rights back and things like that. There should be some, okay, you've worked, you've gotten yourself, you're working yourself better. Should be a way to work yourself out of it, right?
And really, that's evaluated even more often than that.
Okay.
And frankly, every 2 weeks is the data collection. And I can say, I think, overall, we've gotten a lot better as a district, tightening that up and making sure we're getting the interventions in place, we're monitoring the data. Now Lisa's implemented, they have electronic data gathering, and so it's a lot easier
so
to
much
gather the
better.
data.
Communication with parents is improving.
Oh my gosh, we went from having our, the overall plan, service delivery plan, where, and Lisa has explained this to us, typically this is a pro forma, check the box and forget it. Most districts do it that way, and legally you can. And that is how it was done. And Lisa came in and said, no, we're gonna go out. And instead of getting 0 feedback on the surveys, they got over 1,000. So they made a real effort to engage the community, did a mailing, did follow-up phone calls. I mean, it was robust. And it wasn't called, it's way above, it's way more than the law calls for. I mean, we don't have to do that, but she made it.
So, do we have any data as far as BD kids that then get off that BD classification?
Yeah, I imagine we have all that data. Sometimes, you have to be careful with that data specifically, if it's identifiable, right?
Sure.
And so,
Okay. Sure.
yes, we should have all that data. The IEP stuff is kept,
Right. Okay.
we're required by the feds and the state.
Anything else on special ed? I'm going to move this along in the interest of time. Facilities, begin development of the next 10-year FMP. And we met with the Hills City Council and Hills community and teachers, principals. We know we need to begin this work.
Well-
and there's, can I, I'm going to
Sure.
I'm
sorry,
going to put in
pause.
some comments that Lori had on this one in particular, just to make sure that her voice is now part of this. Let me just get my notes up real fast from her. If the preschool group comes forward with a final recommendation that these centers are a component of that solution, then this would probably need to be part of that FMP planning. We talked as a board about pairing for both, equity initiatives, but also potentially for cost savings or efficiency initiatives, and so she was thinking that perhaps the pairing conversation could be part of our longer range kind of facilities discussions, even maybe magnet schools could be part of that kind of facilities plan. I thought those were great ideas. The other area that she wanted the K through 5 in the middle school and the high school, what does that look like in a facilities plan? Steve, I know you raised that, Paul. My son would have loved it too, just one data point, but he was so ready to get to junior high. And he's a shy kid, but I think there's really, both from a social, emotional perspective, but maybe there's some efficiencies in how we're managing our buildings, which would be super interesting to look at. And so that was really Lori's other big point was this next round of work on F&P, she would like us to be focused on how do we gain efficiencies, how do we optimize, how do we use our resources more effectively. We needed to go through this last round of getting our buildings upgraded and HVAC and enough art rooms and music rooms, etc. But this next round should try to take into account efficiency. So that was from Lori. I want to make sure to get that on the table. So
Yeah, well, I echo the interest in pursuing pairing and magnets and that, but I think we got to be real careful with driving and I didn't know we had this big move, other than one comment, to go to these middle school things. It's right,
an idea
right,
to
right,
explore.
right.
It's an exploration.
Right,
Yeah.
right. But as far as we're on the hook with the community for $190 million building program that we should finish as good stewards and fiscally responsible, and that should be a huge amount of our focus. And going in and looking at our attendance data just from last year, if it weren't for Liberty and the stop of the outs and more coming ins, we would have been in worse shape. And are we flat growth-wise? Or are we, because we always kind of looked at ourselves thinking, oh, we're on this constant, steady trajectory up. Well, I don't know if we are. And I for one, feel that we better make sure that we do the $190 million right first, before we get too locked into making more future predictions and changes, before we get that all accomplished. And I think we also have to look at how much indebtedness we want to get this district into.
Yeah, fair enough.
But along those lines, and I'm almost done, I'm wrapping it up. With that Hills communication, with the Hills discussion, the Hills community, and the fact that Hills was left off of the original plan, I feel that a facilities goal or statement to the Hills community saying that we are in the long-term success of Hills and that Hills should be top of the list, if not first priority at that point. But that's
points all well taken. I mean, we can't take our eyes off the prize of completing the work that's underway in the current plan and the money that we've bonded and are currently working on. And I think, we get updates every board meeting on how we're progressing and all of that. I think that's a given. I think what the idea would be is to start the ideation, exploration, what options are out there to address Hills. We're not saying we're going to go off for a bond next year for the next F&P. It's just for the board to do some work to get out ahead of what that plan might look like, what priorities are there, so that when we do get to the end of this current build phase, we're ready to move into what the next priority is, which is very likely Hills. But unless we do the planning and understand what it's going to cost and how we're going to get the money for it, we're never going to be able to get into an execution phase once we get out of our current F&P. So I think, for me, it's just letting the board get out in front of the planning so that we can evaluate options and make some decisions. We've already discussed pairing is not an easy thing to do. It takes time and years and change management and communication. But maybe that's a good thing for us to do if it turned out there were some real efficiencies from a budget standpoint. It actually could save the district's money, potentially. I'd love to see an analysis of the K-5, 6-8, 9-12 scenario. What does that look like? I mean, I'm not sure that we're necessarily saying this FMP needs to go build more schools and add a bunch of classrooms everywhere. If this plan is around, what Lori was suggesting is more around operational efficiencies, then that's a different scenario. I mean, I do think that we need to begin the conversation. I can tell you, Hills, that we just say, yeah, we support you, but we don't start doing any planning and giving them any understanding of when it might happen. They're not going to be satisfied. I think we need to begin this process, whether it's this year or we start it next year. I'm totally open, but I think we need to start getting our arms around what this looks like, because some of this data collection and exploration is going to take time.
Can we add under things to do, continue to explore the Pearl?
Yes, and I think that's on here.
I thought that is on.
Is that-
Under
is that-
financial.
It's in
we'll
there.
look
Oh,
at
financial,
how-
okay,
Yeah.
okay, never mind.
I should say, for the continuing years of the FMP, I think it might be important to kind of identify the root benefit from all of the different projects as it relates to an efficiency thing versus an equity type thing. Because I think when you look at Hills, for instance, right, it's probably more of an equity type thing, so that building is great as all of the other ones, right? But if we look at pairings or middle schools, there's some equity component there, but there's also the efficiency component. So what all different things are we trying to tackle and what all the different pieces are? Because then I think it will help to identify priorities of the different pieces and, what we're going to get out of each one and really what we're after. So I think that's an important part, not just the what are we going to do, but what's the reason for doing the work here and the reason for doing the work here, and which are we going to weigh as the more important part, right? Because I think we've been pretty good at illustrating. I think equity is a pretty big focus for our group, and so I want to make sure that we're doing as much equity things as we feel it needs to be done. But at the same time, as Phil has mentioned, the budget is a thing, so we have to be responsible there too. So the efficiency is not something we can forget either. So I think we have to outline all of those pieces as we look at the different projects.
So I think what I'm hearing you say is that we get really clear on kind of what our criteria are for what we would include in a FMP, and be very specific about this effort would be fitting under the criteria of advancing our equity agenda, or this effort would be aligned with cost savings or optimization of our utilization of the buildings. I mean, so what are the key factors that we want to include as decision-making criteria for what we would then decide to put into an FMP or not?
And maybe that's been part of the process all along. I mean, it's essentially giving you a pros and cons of each one, right? As to what kind of buckets the different pros are falling into.
I mean, and for existing projects that are in the current FMP, or are you talking about for future ones?
Future one, I mean, we're pretty well locked into our
Yeah.
current ones, right? I mean, as far as what's being done there, I mean, little tweaks here and there. This was mentioned at the last board meeting.
I think
But
that,
I think we're pretty well locked into those, and they're all getting started here in the next year or two, right? I mean, and then done.
2021. I mean, it's really not that far around the corner before we're going to be, if we're going to continue any building work beyond just life cycle maintenance, then we need to have a plan in place and a funding plan in place. If we, have to go to do a bond, if we decide, I mean, I don't know how else we would do the Hills Elementary upgrades without some kind of bonded, right?
Well, SAVE is being talked about, but it would be 2024 before we could
Start
access
borrowing against
any of that now, and I don't know, the latest language hasn't said anything about a reauthorization of an RPS or anything like that, has it?
No, and one of the things that you can think about with that, and we've had some internal discussions about it, is in order to bond and have revenue in hand, probably the earliest we could do that is 23. You remember that there's a big lead up though to actually starting any given project, so there's everything from the design work, and all of the rest of that pre-work that goes into it. could we reallocate some money inside of PEPAL to start some of that work before bond eligibility came in, so that when the bonds were available, you'd be able to do the work right away and you wouldn't have to wait an extra year? That's a possibility too. We haven't gone too far down that path. Part of it is we wanted to see where the board wanted to go with it before we did anything with
Yeah.
it. For those of you that were around the last time, you remember we actually had somebody come in and review the facilities so that they could actually give us a professional opinion on what work might need to be done. There might be some merit in thinking about the value of going through that process again. It's been 6 years.
Since
7 years.
BLDD.
Yeah, when they came in and did their facility analysis, so it might be something for us as a group to talk about the value of having an external analysis so that it's actually some objective eyes from outside looking at the facilities and giving us some feedback.
Well, but yeah, that's true, but Hills was part of that original BLD analysis, and nothing was done.
That's not
And-
true, Phil. I mean, I know it was not done to the large scale of the other schools, but Hills was on the facility master plan. There was work done in 2013. to that
It wasn't
school.
part of the bond.
It wasn't
was
part of the
work that
bond,
was
but it was
completed.
part of the 10-year facility
Yeah.
master plan. And I know it wasn't up to the standards of what every other school received, but it was on there in BLD.
We with the BLD study, set down minimums for every school, and the minimums for Hills weren't done.
I understand.
That's what I'm referring to when I'm talking about that. And really, what's outstanding on Hills is $3.5 million, depending on how the gym goes and partners with the community and things like that. That could come out of PEPAL, with prioritizing spending and things out of there.
I think the scope's bigger than that right now from the standpoint of what they talked about when we were down there.
Yeah, they're talking
at
about
the
building a new building.
Yeah.
Well, we talked about a lot of things, but to get it to the original FMP and what was left off for Hills was the gymnasium, multipurpose room, that type of a thing. That's that. Now, we're not talking about a total new school. Wasn't part of the FMP for Hills either.
Remember, we've rezoned it, and so now it's overcrowded. So we have kids that literally live across the street from McDonald's that go to Hills now.
Right.
And so that makes the school full, which we
Yeah.
wanted to do. Part of showing the community of Hills our support for their communities, making sure
That conversation is just illustrative, the
School's
need
full.
to
I think we need a work
identify the
session.
reasons why you would want to
Yeah,
do the different projects and what
yeah,
benefits you
I
can
do
have.
think that we need to get our arms around what this looks like, the criteria for what would be included. To your point, there's enough conversation, I think we need to spend a little time on this in a work session sometime this spring and kind of get ourselves organized on this. In interest of time, I need us to keep moving forward. Approve inclusive play guidelines, did we get that done?
No, we're working on that. We have our experts committees making, and we had one meeting with our experts. We're having, do you have an idea when our next meeting is?
March 4th.
March 4th. So as far as this goal goes to the end of this school year, I would like to think, our goal is to get it in place so the new playgrounds that are coming up on our schools that are going to be opening, that's in place, and we can benefit from having that, and that's the criteria in this
So we think
selection.
we'll have the guidelines done by May?
Well, yeah,
I think, I mean,
is that,
before the end of the fiscal year.
Right,
I would think
right.
May,
that's
June?
probably-
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think it's kind of a dual track, working on the guidelines so we have a document, but at the same time, our consultants are working directly with Ben and the other folks in the physical plan, so that, as Phil talked about, we can have some of these things being input into the work that's
Yeah.
going on our playgrounds that are
Okay.
being done right now.
Okay, good, that's great, thank you for that update. What about the safety and security? I mean, I know that group is meeting, the safety and security committee, are we,
I think there's an update from them coming
yeah,
in the next
There is.
month or so to the
Yeah.
board.
yeah, so that will make some progress in that. Board governance, we just, yeah, we're making
We
progress in
are,
that,
yeah.
and P&G starting to dig into the details.
Trickling into the full board to review, but it's already out there on our board docs.
Yeah, yeah, that's great, that's fantastic progress. We had put in a goal around participating in 2 team development activities, such as implicit bias training, restorative justice circles, media training, out code training. We did implicit bias training, yay. And a few of us were able to get to ISB, which had some various training opportunities, but it wasn't obviously as the full group. Is there appetite with the board to do another, session on something? I know there's a little bit of fatigue from all the work that we've been doing, at least Lori suggested that as well. But I'm just trying to get a read on the group. Do we want to try to get something else in this year?
I'd second the fatigue though.
Okay, what do others think? 3, yeah.
I'm leaning,
Because we will have, we will have work sessions on some of these other topics, and so,
I guess I'll be in the minority, say it's always good to improve. As opposed to.
Say, I feel pretty bad saying I'm too tired to get better. I mean, I get it because I'm tired. This little bit less intensive winter meeting time frame has been a nice recharge from the crazy summer and fall. But I kind of feel like we are going to then ramp up again here in the spring, so I think our recharge is not going to last for long.
have we all done restorative justice?
I participated.
I have
in
not.
this.
Yeah,
Yeah, we were.
a couple.
Well,
That'd be a good one. I mean,
for those that haven't done restorative justice, I think I know I benefited from taking it.
yeah, and just understand, just have a feeling that it's gonna, when we talk about lots of different things, that, hearing the story about the circle at the school with the racial tension, I think we can't, it's hard to overestimate the real change that happens in those circles, and I think it's a very effective tool, and I think the more we understand it, and that will hopefully cause us to support it more and encourage it more, because it's very not your traditional school
Right.
system thing, but it does work.
Could we ask Laura to do something?
Oh, yeah,
for
she'd be
us?
happy to. Yeah.
Maybe,
Yeah, yeah.
maybe it's not a circle, but maybe it's how they work, or maybe we do a circle.
We covered it in this,
We did an
safety committee on the
Oh.
soft approaches. She came in and talked to our group about it. So,
Would that, is there interest in that? Let's do that. Okay, good. We could do it in a work session if we wanted to slot it in there. Instead of a separate Saturday kind of thing, you know what I mean? Just kind of put it into a regular meeting cadence. Sorry? Well, we did talk about, it could be, when we did, we
Like a
had it.
more deeper dive what we're talking.
Yeah, we can do that. Ed committee? Yeah.
Yeah, so we want to do something on restorative practice, we want to build it into a regular meeting cadence, not a special Saturday or something. Okay. That's good. Creating career and technical ends policy, some of the fine arts. Did
Well, one of the things I'll tell you is you're not going to see ends policies as we move
Oh, that's right.
into the new one, remember, so that's going to look a little different, so.
we? Yeah.
Well, we can just keep it, whatever the
Whatever
thing
comes
is.
in the
Right.
new
Fits
governance.
more in where are we at in that vision piece,
Okay.
right?
Oh,
Okay.
okay. All right. And then achieving better boardsmanship team achievement award. I meant to go and look what all the requirements were for that, and I failed to do that before this meeting. I can actually go do that and send an email out to the board. It's just we see what's in front of us, and we
I
can.
mean, to get the better boardsmanship award, you guys probably do a lot of the work already. You just don't find credits for it on their site.
Okay.
The award.
So let me just go dig it up and send it out to everyone so we have it in front of us, and we can kind of, maybe we take 10 minutes at a work session.
They'll have a letter to the editor,
Yeah.
guest opinion, that's like 25 points. You
Yeah.
just have to submit it.
Does-
You come to the legislative forum, because the legislature will invite them in, that's
Mhm.
another one that's.
So let me get that out and maybe just tally up, like maybe how close we are. I'll take a look at it and send something out to us, okay?
Is attendance at the board or at the state convention, is that a requirement or just another points thing?
It's just a point.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just a point-based system.
Yeah.
You're
Nice.
all learning, you're attending legislative forums, you're writing opinion pieces,
Yeah.
you're serving on a committee, you do that. You're chairing a committee, you do that.
Here, I thought I was always going to the convention.
No?
Yeah, no, so that's good. I'll send something out. We can see maybe we're closer to the home thing. Financial, we actually did this one, decrease net negative loss and open enrollment. That's good. And then we are doing the Pearl ballot initiative exploration, so that's progressing. Anything else on our goals? We are so running out of time, but I was noting down some things for work session topics. But before we get into that, actually, just want to, again, kind of get a read of the room. The input from Lori was, if possible, stay on, board meeting nights for work sessions. We had, remind me, Steve, which is the day, is it the first or the second of the month that we try to have a really shorter agenda so that we can have more
We've
time
flexed
for work
that,
session?
we haven't been as strict on that the last few months, just
Yeah.
because
We had so much
it's
to
been
get
more
done.
timely in terms of when we need stuff on there. I think that we've gotten tighter just in our operations in general, and so that's, you've seen that if you go back and look. I'm sure you're not maybe too close to the tree to see it, but the board meetings have gotten more efficient, and so that's just allowed a little bit more time for us, whether it's the second or the fourth meeting, second or fourth Tuesday.
But I think generally, keeping work sessions on regular board meeting nights makes sense. It was a lot of work this fall, we knew it was gonna be, and we did it, but I think it was hard on schedules and everything.
We're working really hard, which I hope you're seeing. We're working really hard to tighten up talking to you, so that, keeping those 36-point slideshows off the agenda, so that it's just a lot tighter in that
Yeah,
conversation.
and we read the materials and we have questions, and so.
More space to work.
Jen, one suggestion, we're talking about scheduling, and the way that we've been talking, a lot of our talk has been about the work getting done before the end of the school year. But as a board, and election years, they don't really run that way anymore since they're in November. So I think we really have to think out further, because typically in September, October, you're setting work goals for your board. And we don't really want to do that in September, October, and then have four.
No, we need to do that goal setting after the
So I'm
November
saying,
election.
when you're looking out your schedule and work session, I think you should look, further.
Through October. Yeah, it's gonna be so weird next year. We're not gonna get that far out in our planning today, but if we can at least for like the next 3 months, kind of think about what our work session priorities would be, topics would be, then if we can get priorities from this group, then maybe Steve and Paul and I in an agenda setting session could actually start slating them in to propose for future, to bring back to you guys. Does that sound reasonable, just as a kind of efficient way of using our time today? But I heard we're going to want to hear from the equity committee on the revised comprehensive equity plan. That's a work session topic I heard JP talk about. I think we do need to get organized on what are we going to do around in the next round of FMP. We probably need at least one work session on that just to get organized on that. I do think it would be interesting to have a work session on this kind of building the business-community partnership,
Sure.
and I don't know exactly what that would look like, but maybe we could have Mark Nolte come and talk to us from ICAT or something. I'm just thinking out loud.
I know a lot of local business people
Yeah.
would like to be a part of that conversation.
But I just, I think that would be something just nice to get the ball rolling on that. And then, what did I put this? I can't even read my own writing. Oh, a restorative practice session at a work session with Laura Cottrell. Anything else from a work session standpoint that felt like was emerging as a topic?
Keep in mind that as we go through budget, that's going
Oh,
to be
budget,
the primary focus.
definitely. That's probably going to be at every work session, right, until
Yeah.
April. Fair enough. Is there anything missing?
Well, that kind of divorced the two topics of just FMP as a broad strokes and kind of bigger picture, what we want to look at. Before we can come up with an FMP, right, we need to decide, okay, are we going to look at middle schools? Are we going to look at
Yeah.
paired schools? Are we going to look at preschool centers? Or, I think we need to chomp on those things and figure out what direction we're going to go, holistically, and then say, all right, now we can start putting
Yeah.
together the pieces that are going to go
Completely
into
agree.
an FMP.
That's kind of what I meant by getting organized, is
Okay.
kind of understanding what types of projects and what scope we're talking about, what criteria we'd be using, that sort of thing. It's not, we're not really planning yet, we're getting. together.
I want, because you've said it with FMP, I think it's important to say, take that facilities plan out of the
Got it.
picture and figure out what direction we want to go.
Yeah.
Because if we're in the mindset of, well, we're not going to have money to do this, or we're not going to be able to build
Yeah,
that,
that's good.
then it's going to limit the conversation. And I think we just kind of want to throw out there, okay, what, because it may be 6 years before you even get started on some things, right? But
Fair enough.
I think if we want to know what direction we're going to head to first,
I think
and
that's
then
good.
start putting it together.
Yeah, I like how you said that, getting organized on our direction for the district and what our priorities are, and that may lead to an FMP later on. Yeah, that's good. Anything else that we would want to put on agendas, for the three of us to chew on from an agenda setting standpoint? You can always email me and Paul if something comes up that you think about a little bit later. So I think we've got a great, I've been taking notes, I'll send out kind of our updates on all of the topics that we've covered, and so, maybe we can just put it on our website too.
Sure.
Here, how are we doing, and here are the new things that we've added, and, so we're transparent on our goals. Trying to find our agenda for today, and I think we're gonna have, Steve, you're gonna give us a quick, this was in response to your question, Phil, I'm not sure it's gonna go as deep as you were looking for, but at least it's an overview of the administrative team.
So what you have as you walk through here is, so if you think about page 1 as being the overview, so you've got all the positions on here. In the interest of time, I'm not going to walk through all of them. But then as you scroll down to the subsequent pages, you see the structure underneath each of those positions. So you got Craig and Diane and Leslie and Blaine, so you've got all the folks here. And then you've got, we wanted to make sure that you knew kind of the scope and scale of each of those operations. So whether you're looking at Allison and nutrition, you can see how many staff we have, the number of managers, the office staff, and our nutrition specialist in there as an example. Here's our HR office.
Well, is it normal for all those things to report to the CFO?
No, it is
Different?
not. As a matter of fact, I'll just share with you that this is a default process. So when we had an administrative transition, when David Duty left, he was our technology guy, and he moved into working with some of these areas just out of necessity. He left, and so as we went through that process of absorbing that position into the organization, Craig was the lucky recipient of some things that normally do not fall into your CFO's office, in particular physical plant, nutrition, and transportation. And it was simply because he'd had some level of knowledge about it because of his now 35 years in public ed. So no, those usually do not fall in that role. Oops. HR, you can see the structure there. A little bit hard to read just to the side, but our secondary role. And I will tell you that although we have the directors here, they really report this way from an evaluation standpoint, but we are very fortunate in this district that Amy and Matt work so seamlessly together, because both the three directors that Matt has evaluation responsibility for and the three directors that Amy has responsibility for work very collaboratively as a team of 6. So we are very, very fortunate that way. It keeps them from developing silos that prevent them from working across organizational functions. So they tend to meet as a whole and work as a whole. So again, very fortunate in the organization there. Some of these acronyms you may not know. I'm not going to go through all of them now.
Sorry, back in the directors, and I don't know, this isn't my space, but does Matt and Amy, do they each need to have their own? Or could one director of diversity and inclusion, for example, kind of manage both? Is it just too big a job for
What are you
a
looking
person?
at? Sorry.
So, I'm sorry, I was looking at Matt and Amy, and you said there's 3, they each have 3 directors.
Yes, and that's for evaluation.
Different directors,
But,
different areas.
They evaluate we need to, from an org chart standpoint, they evaluate those directors. From an operational
They
standpoint,
work together.
they really work as a team of 8.
Okay,
So Amy and Matt work with the 6 directors collectively because they're siloed from a responsibility standpoint, but maybe a great one to look at is when you look at learning supports and special ed.
yeah,
So special ed has some very specific functions that are based on federal and state law. Learning supports, when you think about health services, you think about kids who have 504 plans, and you think about the crossover that might have with special education, ELL, the crossovers with special ed. It's difficult for either of those two to do their jobs independently without the support of the other one. So
okay.
we've worked really hard to make sure that this is truly a team. And so from a reporting standpoint, we need to have some chain of command there and some evaluatory responsibility. But the two of them really collectively work together as a team of 8.
Okay, thank
That's
you.
what I was trying to share with you. Sorry I didn't do that very
No,
well.
I was, yeah, a little bit all over the place, so. That's all.
So like I said, there's a bunch of acronyms on here, and it was either that or you had really tiny print. So if there's anything on here as you're reviewing this, if you want some more feedback, what's a MARS, what's PBIS, I'm happy to walk through any of those with you individually.
Yeah, I know when I onboarded, we had several work sessions very early on where they would go through, and I remember Craig doing it, and we also had the names of everybody who was in those positions, and it would break down. And Craig would get up and he would say, yes, this is my department, this is what I do, this is, this is that, and you knew all the faces and the people that were doing it. And I think for us to do our due diligence and everything, we also should have job descriptions as well, just to make sure that we don't have overlapping services, that something isn't there. I can look at this and I still don't know who our ADA compliance officer is. And some other specific things. So, and I think, I know for myself, it was extremely,
I was just asking Chase, are some of these on the website?
Well, yeah, I have a response, but I'll let Phil finish. I mean,
no, go ahead.
well, I understand what you're saying, but I think that, this is an organizational chart, and what you're asking for is a little bit different. Some of the things, the ADA compliance officer, those are listed where they need to be appropriately listed in our board policies, on the website, things like that. And we have job descriptions, but most organizations, you wouldn't see in their org chart a description of all the duties those individuals do. This is supposed to be just a flow chart of how the organization flows. I mean, I'm happy to sit down and provide some of that information for you, but we would never, I should say we never, unless directed by the board, we're not going to build out an org chart that there is a block that has everybody's responsibilities underneath it. And we don't add names because you don't build positions based on an individual. You build positions based on the needs of the organization, because that's how an organization efficiently runs, right? You don't create positions for individuals. You create it based on the needs of the organization so that we can
The only reason I would create I would ask that there's a name, so then if you go through and you say, well, I need to talk to this person, instead I don't know who the junior high athletic director is at some place. I might be able to.
So with all
due respect.
Yeah, that's a bad way to say it.
No,
But
go
no,
ahead.
with all due respect, actually, not to you, to Steve. If you were going to talk to, for me personally, if you had any questions about things that relate to HR or anything you think would be in my area, I would want you to contact me. I wouldn't want you contacting the people 3, 4, 5 layers down because they're not used to talking with board members, so they might be caught off guard.
Correct.
And so I get that you want to know that, but if it's for contacting people specifically, I would really ask you and all board members to contact me first. And I know that Amy and Matt and and Craig feel the same way, but the board should know if they want to know who's in certain positions. So we don't want to hide that from you either.
And my only rationale for wanting to know the job descriptions and the functions is to make sure that we don't have gaps. And I feel that that's something that should be part of just annual board due diligence and review And it shouldn't be the type of a thing that it's, I think it would be normal, a normal part of our board activities. Mainly, like I say,
I disagree with that. By state statute, the board has one employee, and that's the superintendent, and everything on the administrative side flows to the superintendent, and we have the job descriptions published, and I can give you the links for those, but for the board to go through and review every single job description for over 2,000 employees,
We're not going-
that's why the superintendent hires me and my team.
I understand that, Chase, and I'm not talking about reviewing 2,000 employees, but I think it's important for the board to know the job descriptions of the major players.
Sure. Okay.
And that.
Would it be possible, just on this document, to literally hyperlink these to the job descriptions? I mean, I know that's a lot of work.
It's a ton of work, and again,
Not
I
worthwhile.
honestly do not think it's a board function. I think we come to the board table and we assess risk, we assess performance of the superintendent and the data that we look at for showing the performance of the district. If as a board we're concerned and believe there may be a gap, if we think maybe there's a gap on ADA compliance, for just to use that example, then we say, we think there's a gap. We'd like to see some more information, Steve and Chase, on this particular matter. Bring it to a board agenda or a work session. So I think our responsibility is to assess risk and performance and making sure that we're hitting our marks as we've set up for our goals. But I mean,
No, Janet, I prefer that route, and like, I'm happy to provide anything the board wants, but everybody's really busy, and we're doing a lot of work, and so if there are known gaps and you show those to us, we will definitely do our due
Yeah.
diligence to bring that information and to fill that. But I have a hard time knowing the amount of work my team's doing right now, especially with the implementation of the ERP, how we're trying to navigate a budget shortfall and all those other pieces, to say, hey, we need to take a time out and we need to
Yeah.
focus on redeveloping all our job descriptions
it's not,
just as
it's-
a check on where we are at this point.
Well, you said redevelop.
Right. Or linking
Linking,
or.
yeah.
Okay, well,
It's-
so
it's-
so
This
this,
is a great example. So the answer is, the simple answer is yes, absolutely. We could take this chart right here, we could link every single job description that's connected to it, we could list all 133 nutrition staff on there. I direct Chase to hire somebody because our turnover is
That's-
rapid and our support
that's
staff
the
is.
thing. Once
you weren't
So we
listening,
gotta be
well,
doing that
I,
every day.
I apologize if I'm not making myself clear enough. I'm not interested in the specificity of 133 nutritional staff. But I think it's important to know the head nutrition person in that job title.
It's,
Okay, if it's that simple, share it with the board, that's right.
I want to say something that I found helpful shortly after onboarding,
Allison.
right? There
Okay,
was,
and
It's really
that's,
not that hard
and that's
to
the
do.
job description.
It's not the job description.
But it talks about what she's responsible for.
That's her
Okay.
introduction. There's
Okay.
Allison's email. I mean,
right after we
Okay.
got on the board, I was given a list of, basically, here's all
Yeah, all
the
of it.
director areas. Who would you like to meet with? And I got to select that, and I pretty much selected everyone because I didn't know.
Yeah.
And I knew faces and stuff, but I didn't really know exactly what their role was. And I got to go in and meet, and I basically had 3 questions that I asked of everyone, and every conversation ended up lasting like an hour and a half. But I only had 3 questions. It's basically, what is your role? What is my role to help you do your job? And what would I do that would stop you from doing your job well? And those are the 3 questions I asked every one of them. And again, it was a very lengthy conversation, but looking at the chart, I had to go and look just now if anybody's behind me, they saw me doing it. Certain titles, I know exactly who they are because the title is very clear in my head, like Director of Curriculum. I know that's Diane because curriculum, it stands out, but I get lost sometimes with some of the terminology. So what Kate does and what Laura does, and looking at their titles, like which one's Student Services and what the other name is, I don't even know what it is. Learning, like those names don't mean a lot to me. So looking at it, I'm like, I had to go onto the website and go figure out who they were, and then think back to the conversations that I had with them and what the differences were So it is kind of trying to make that connection easily what the role is to the person that's doing it. And it is kind of hard when you look at it abstractly just on a chart like that.
Well, I think as Janet said up top, I mean, or Steve, we put this together, and Sean, I agree with you, when I had to do it, and when I got into the department level, looking down below, I had a lot of conversations with Amy and Matt about how they wanted that to flow out. And I mean, obviously they're living documents and they can continue to be modified and changed, but we just wanted to be responsive and get something out there. I do think it's important to have, and Phil's right about having the names, and Sean about having the names associated, but we need to have a couple of different probably versions. One that is just kind of based on, here's what our org structure looks like. We have a superintendent on down, regardless of who sits in these seats. But then, yes, being able to make those connections for who's in there right now, I can support that. We can go back and we can do some of that work, and let's have a sidebar with Kim, and we can go back to maybe the onboarding materials and not just have them for onboarding for board members, but have it somewhere either living electronically on the website, or have Kristen build out a sheet that gives it to us, because it's not just for you all. If you're having the questions, you're probably getting those questions from people in the community, and we want people to know who to go to. But at the same time, it goes back to the point Phil we were talking about is, I don't want to put our employees in a position where they're being asked a question that they might not have the information to, or they're just not positioned to ask, whether it's from a community member, a board member, or even a principal, right? I don't want the principals going to Allison's kitchen managers if they have a concern about how we're producing food. They need to be going to going to Allison. And so I think we just have to strike that balance about who we're putting out there to be the public face of some of these offices.
Agreed.
So what you were just describing, the additional work that you're just, will getting the ERP done make that easier?
We're still working through, I don't know the answer to that, in all
I
honesty.
mean, for me, the priority is getting that ERP
Yes.
done. Because I do know that that creates a bunch of efficiencies in other areas of our work. And I would respectfully request that additional work that seems reasonable, that we will prioritize your team's efforts to get the ERP done and then move on to that next piece of work would be my
Sure.
recommendation.
And that top sheet we can do easily.
Yeah, I was just thinking, at work we have our QMS, our quality management system, right? There is an org structure that looks very much like this, but they do have names at basically the upper management level.
Yeah.
They have specific names for those roles, and then everything else doesn't. And I'm thinking that,
And that's why
because
we-
you're talking like
Right.
8 people or something, then that might be a little helpful.
Yeah, Sean, that's how I'm envisioning it, is everybody on this first page
That
is Steve
page.
showing would have names,
Yeah.
but below that, you're not gonna see names.
So that's an easy, that is
I mean, Kim and I could do that
Maybe.
sitting here.
Kim's probably halfway done.
Kim's
with
probably
it.
already done it for me, yeah, exactly.
I mean, do you guys, I'll just ask this question, do you want as much as also the elementary and secondary principals as did, or is that, I mean,
I mean, you
Okay.
can go to the website, I don't know,
I mean, I'm not asking for that, I'm just asking what the sense is of the board,
I don't need it, I go
That
to the
seems like
website, and I'm
the-
looking for a principal who I don't know for some reason,
Go to the
then I
website.
would go to the school website.
That's what I
I mean,
So, and Phil, we can have this conversation offline, but you don't normally ask general questions if there's not something else, and so if there is a gap, let's talk about that, because I want to make sure that we know what that is, and I'm not
Agreed.
telling you that you'd say it right now if you think there is one.
Right,
But
well,
if you feel like there's one, let's set up a time to talk about that, because I do want to make
correct.
sure that
Well,
we're
I
getting
don't
that
know if
done.
there's a gap unless I know what the, you know what I mean? I don't know, how can I say that there's a gap if I don't know the job description and that type of a thing? That, like I say, we can discuss this, we
Sure.
can discuss this further.
And I would just hope that, right, we have these conversations assuming that there aren't gaps, right?
Correct. And that is where I'm coming from.
Yeah,
But I don't know what I don't know.
yeah.
I'd go somewhere in the middle, at least a brief description of
Yeah.
what each main silo does as a general rule, not so much a job description. I mean, I look at this chart, if you look at under learning supports, you get a pretty good idea of what the department does, because there's a whole bunch of stuff underneath it with very specific areas. You know, it's like, oh, well, ELL lives there, and PBIS lives there, and mental health is living there. And you go up to student services, it says student services.
So,
You know what I mean? Like,
Right. No, I
what,
think-
what does that
right.
mean if it was just like student services includes blah, blah, blah?
so one of,
That would be helpful.
so obviously, right, this doesn't look like, and this doesn't look like documents we normally post to be
Agreed.
public facing. And the reason is Kristen, I haven't gotten this to Kristen to make it look like it's ready for prime time. And so I need to have a conversation with her too. And some of the feedback I'm hearing is it might not be, it's not hyperlinks necessarily to the job descriptions, but if what we can do is make this a living document where they are hyperlinked to
I
the.
don't support that. I'm sorry
Okay.
to be
Well, I
so,
was gonna
I'm
say
sorry
that
to be so directive about it. Go to the website.
No, that's what I was gonna say, is.
I mean, there's a whole long list of all the things that happens in learning supports. You go
Right,
to
that's
every
what I was-
Student
department.
services.
We're on the same page, Shannon. Is if we
Okay.
did anything, it would be, you click on that position,
Yeah.
and it takes you to the website page we've already developed.
Okay,
I wouldn't have Kristen develop anything new.
Okay,
If you clicked on learning supports, you would see Laura, and you would see all those different pieces.
Yeah.
So as Kristen builds this out to make it more ready for public viewing, I'll just say, hey, let's
I just don't see
embed
the
these
problem
behind it.
solved.
And you don't have to do any work, it's just, you click on it, and, you know, you click on Leslie or Craig, and the
Yeah,
business
it's-
office comes up. You
It's
click
all
on
here.
equity.
It's all there.
It's all on
It's
the
all
website,
there,
but
right.
I just why I'm saying, I don't know
Yeah.
why I would waste anyone's time creating
Okay.
links from a org chart if we can just go to the website and see the information.
Okay.
I'm struggling with this one.
I am partially in agreement with you and partially not, because I think you have to go into it with some basic knowledge to go to the website, because otherwise you're like, I don't know, this department, I'll start reading about that one.
Well,
Like if you're
but-
looking for something specific, it's hard to find
Well,
anything.
But I heard Phil say he wants to do kind of an audit of things. Well, just, it's here. Go through department by department and see if you believe there are some gaps. I mean, but for that sort of purpose, it's all here. You have a different use case. I've got a specific question. I'm not sure if it's learning supports or whatever. That's a different use case, and if you think you can get your answer more easily, your question more easily answered by an interactive link from an org chart, then perhaps there's a use there. I'm sorry, I text Steve. I mean, you know, where do I get this question answered, you know? I wouldn't ever use this tool, but that's just me. That's just me. And maybe it's useful for new board members coming on board, and we do need to consider that because we potentially could have 4 new board members in a year's time, so.
And I would say that might be, you know, one of the things that Chase suggested. It's something that Kim and Kristen and I have on our ongoing calendar of work is board onboarding. And I think that that's a good place for it to live. And I think the suggestion that board onboarding actually has a site on school boards so that people in the general public who aren't on the board, who may be interested in getting on the board, have the opportunity to learn about the district, and that's one avenue to do it. And I think that those are the kind of tools that would help new board members, but might be beneficial to the community. So I
Yeah.
think
I mean, maybe that's actually another kind of topic we want to take on as a work session at some point, and get some feedback on what would have helped us on board as board members, considering this next election cycle that we might be getting more people, new people.
And I'd say, I think of all the things that we could possibly do to work through this, I think hyperlinking each one of these higher level organizations, up here,
Hyperlinking from that to the
web
website?
page makes, if this is a document on the website, and your question is, I don't know where to go, and you can roll down here and say, oh, it lives there, and then you can just click through to whatever it is, learning supports or whatever that you figured out that you want to go to, and it'll immediately take you to the website so you don't have to look for it. I think that's a pretty straightforward solution that doesn't take a lot of time for us
Well,
to
as
do.
long as it isn't going to take a lot of time to do and take a lot of time to maintain, because links break, or, I mean, it's just,
No, but I agree with you, Jane. I don't think, we haven't heard a large cry for saying, hey, we haven't been able to find your org chart. I think there is a reason, and an organization our size should have an updated living org chart. But I think you put an org chart out there, who it's going to be used by most are applicants that are trying to figure out, like,
Yeah.
when we, you know, we just hired we just hired Jeremy's role, the equity director. they'll go on in when they're doing their due diligence, see, okay, who does this position report to, who does it supervise, things like that. The general public that has questions, they don't necessarily think that that's where they're gonna find their
That's fair,
answers.
but applicants, I mean, I
Yeah.
can see it being useful there.
Because I do get that question when I talk to potential, okay, now who do I report to? I get it from that perspective a little bit,
Mhm.
but it's good to have, we can look at it, definitely,
Well,
Okay.
and if you just hyperlink those,
yes.
that would probably take less time than this discussion.
Probably.
Kim's probably, she's already got the names in there, she's halfway through the hyperlinks now. Okay, so there's some action items from that, thank you. In our last few minutes, just to have a short reflection on our norms and how we feel we're doing as a board. And I had those open and I shut up on it. It's because it's on my website. Hang on. Take me 2 seconds to get there. Board goals and norms. So our first one was, student achievement is our #1 priority. Every action we take must be in support of students. We talk about achievement, maybe it's a different word. It's like, it's student
Outcomes.
outcomes or something. I mean, that may be some kind of change we want. That feels a little more narrow. Maybe we want it to be broader. Maybe, I don't know. Student outcomes is a #1 priority. But do we feel like we do this? Do we feel like their students are the top decision factor for us in the work that we do?
I think it's definitely was top of mind as we were moving through the whole process of laying the boundaries and things like that.
I do too.
For me,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna speak for everyone else. I know that we also all feel that pinch of, well, where's the result, right? Like, what's the proof that we did anything? And well, we haven't done anything yet, right? We made a decision for next year. So it's hard to make that connection that we're getting the outputs or whatever word we throw in there. But I feel from a personal level that the discussions have been centered around, what's going to be best to help our kids. And we may be flat out wrong, right? But I think we're at least using that as our guiding force.
I mean,
so.
if you take the boundaries, for example, when we brought the staff in, for example, it was still about the kids, right? And even though there was maybe some tension or some consternation, we said, okay, but this is for the kids and this is what we're doing. And we could have said, well, staff doesn't like that, so even though we think it's best for the kids, we need to default to staff. I think that's one example of how we keep. And maybe achievement is too narrow a word, I don't know.
But we can revisit norms.
You could just say students are
Oh, gosh, that would be
students.
easy to change, wouldn't it? Yeah, we can just make that change. How about the next one, practice respect?
That's a lot of crickets.
Yeah, I can share what Lori had on this one. Her one comment was making sure that we do distribute all questions that go to staff or Steve with responses. I think her impression is that we're maybe not getting everyone's questions distributed out, and she's supposed to make sure that everyone's seeing everything. So that was her impression. I just wanted to share it.
You say, maybe just to follow the process, when we get the questions, I funnel them to Kim. Kim collects the answers and aggregates them because they might come from multiple different departments. And when
Okay.
she's got all the questions answered, then she just hits forward to board.
Is
So
that-
that's been our
Is
standard.
that really only
protocol.
happening if the questions are submitted via email? You know what I mean? So if
Yeah, we don't
I
collect,
come in and talk to you or
Right.
something.
No,
and I
this
get-
is me.
we're not.
And he
we're not-
comes
This-
in and asks me.
I come and talk to Kim, Kim converts it to this, and then everybody sees what I've asked. And I think very rarely does anything I ask anyone else not get shared with everybody else. So, going just by the email traffic, I don't know that anybody else is asking any questions, because we don't see very many.
I'll admit, I don't ask very many questions. I mean, I do ask questions, so.
We don't transcribe every question that someone asks us. No, we don't do that. No, I don't think
So
we transcribe
probably
all
it
of
sounds like the only one that does transcribe is if we went directly to Kim, she would transcribe it. But my conversations with Craig, when I'm in his office, he answers, I walk out.
Yeah.
So are we saying we want those to be sent out to everyone? If you.
Well, there was a discussion, and this is before you were on the board, but when Lynch was president, there was a lot of conversations and questions that he had that we didn't get until it leaked out in a discussion at a work session or at a board table. And we also got it from Steve, that Steve was complaining he was getting too many questions. And the rationale was, well, maybe 3 board members were asking you the same question and you were responding. So at that time, the discussion was, well, we're going to share everyone's questions, so then that way, if JP had the same question that I had, well, if he responds to me, well, JP's not going to send that email and just frees up Steve from having to respond to 7 people that way. And it also, we're all supposed to be equal here. No one's supposed to have any more power than anyone else on the board. And so by sharing that info, and everything is public record, as my emails have been shared, we should know what, if that way. And personally, I don't object when I go through and I do the bills in that way. So I think that's one way everyone knows what I saw, what I asked. I don't always report to them at the board table, because I feel all 7 of you have seen those. It is a public record, a public document that way. But that's where I think we got to that point, is because not everyone was getting the same information, and that's crucial for us to function effectively, I feel.
I agree. I mean,
We do try to take all the email questions that come in, and all the email questions we do a respond all to. So if you're in talking to Craig, or if you stop me in the hallway and ask me a question, we're not stopping to take the time to write that down, transcribe an answer, type it up, send it out. We're not doing that.
Well, I guess I'm going to take it upon myself, because I don't necessarily, I'm not coming in to have Kim transcribe anything. So when I have questions, I'm going to take it upon myself to, even if it is I see somebody in the hallway, which I'm not here all that often, and get an answer, I will maybe send the email to Kim and say, hey, just as a reminder, I asked this question and I got this answer. Can you please send that out? So I'm going to at least try and get my questions more.
And it has to be careful that it doesn't violate open meetings. That it's a FYI, that type of a thing. That it's not an ongoing conversation.
I'll try and record my own questions, I guess, is what I'm saying. So.
Yeah, I usually bring my questions at the board meeting, and I apologize, sorry I didn't get you this question beforehand, as to how mine typically play out. But yeah, if we can just all kind of agree, if we've got questions that had verbal responses, we'll just take a moment to send it out to everyone so that we're very transparent. I think that's good. We've got 2 minutes left. How are we doing on leading by example? Setting high expectations for ourselves, for staff, students, community members, folks on board development.
Because these are individual, I'm doing that as an individual, and when I represent the board.
I would keep going back to all the work that we did. I think we set a pretty good example that this is an important thing to us, and we're going to put in the work to make it happen, and we did, right? And I think that carried through admin and everyone else, and I think it was.
Well, I mean, I'll just anecdotally, the feedback I hear is people have a pretty positive opinion of the way we function. You don't hear a lot of people saying things they used to say previously, like, oh my God. So that's the feedback I've heard, is that people feel we're functional, and so I think we're doing a good job.
How about communication? Communicate directly.
I think the the s'more that we put out was a nice
That's
addition
really-
Yeah.
for board communication. As we went through the whole process, and I felt like, we were having meetings all over the place and talking to everyone all over, and months into it, people would be like, this is the first I've heard of it. And it boggled my mind that they hadn't heard of it, and I think every chance we have to put another way to get that information out there is a good thing, because we miss one person and they're going to be blindsided by pretty big decisions, right? So I think it's important that we take every opportunity we can to communicate. And I think we have. I do like the s'more that got put together, because it's a nice, quick little synopsis and easy way to digest stuff.
I think it's also communicating with one another is the idea of it.
One voice, one board. Anyone supporting the vote?
I think so, yeah. I mean, we had a lot of, some no votes, but we've even had some 4-3 votes, and I don't feel that people are hashing that out or revisiting it.
Focusing on priorities, clearly we set a high priority around the equity agenda, and
And
we've
we
worked our
gave it the
tails
most time.
off to get that done on time so that we could successfully implement it for next year.
No, I think we're doing actually quite well
And then effective board and committee meetings. Oh, gosh, remind me, Phil, you wanted to talk about,
Yeah,
the finance committee? Gosh,
well-
I'm sorry, if we can just, maybe we can do it in
You-
this setting, though.
If I just get a couple of minutes at the end, that's fine.
Yeah, let's talk about it, because it's a committee meeting and we're talking.
Okay, yeah, well, Finance Committee is something we're all a part of. We're supposed to participate in it, like our Ed Committee and everything like that. I've got in here the sign-up sheets, and I want to thank Sean, or I'm going to recognize Sean. I'm not going to recognize those that were, I'm going to do the opposite of what I normally do and beat up on the people that don't do things.
I'll do my mea
And-
culpa, I'm
Well,
bad.
no, Jan, I'm not going there. I'm going to say Sean was a board member that did the most. And besides myself, who did everyone. But I want to compliment Sean for coming in. It is important. It's part of our role as board members. I have given those sheets and news articles about what's happening in Waukee for us to recognize that we cannot give that responsibility to someone else. That is ours for fiscal oversight. We are the community's checks and balances. And what is evidence of what happened there is that people were not asking enough questions, people were letting things slide, and that it is incumbent on us to be on top of it. I don't claim to see everything, and I'm glad that, and that's why there's others. And I know, and I have to say too, with the announcement with Craig taking early retirement, Craig has been phenomenal help and resource, and he will be, it'll be a challenge to replace Craig. He's been extremely helpful with me and supportive, and supports an extra set of eyes. I've never gone in and had a discussion with Craig that it's like, oh, no, it's like, yes. And he does his best to get answers before the board meetings, and that way, but it is our collective responsibility. And like I say, Sean definitely was head man, followed by Paul, followed by Lori, and that. So, but it's important, and I'm going by 2018 data, and I appreciate Ruthina. Ruthina started.
Oh, I have no problem. I have a busy job, so.
No, I
it's
understand.
hard, so.
No, I know.
Yeah.
I have a busy job too. I'm self-employed,
Mhm.
and every time I come in and do it, I'm not.
Yeah, no,
I make a financial statement in that. No, I
In
understand.
the middle of the day,
Yeah.
it's let me finish. When we get that notification, I run 2 departments. I'm just saying, I appreciate those that are able to get in, and I think as a board working together, that's why sometimes we have to pitch in and cover, because it's going to be times where I can't just say, I'm gonna spend 3 hours up at the district. From 8 to 4, my work day, I get paid. And that's vacation or making up. So I appreciate those that can do it.
Yeah, I wish we could have an
Yeah.
all-hour, it is some, and
And
It's
I've
very
approached
different.
that too. And Ruthina, I was trying to give you a compliment before you started, is that you started off this year with doing it, starting off the beginning of this year. But, and I have approached that, it would be easier for me to come in on a Saturday as well.
I know it's
That
hard
way.
because you have staff
And
here, I get it, so-
sometimes it's the type of a thing,
Christina.
sometimes it's the type of a thing that, I know Martin Luther King Day kind of crept up on us, and it was like, oh my gosh, I was planning to do it on Monday, then we recognized it's closed, so okay, I came in on the Friday and that, but I'll stop my
No,
speech
points
there.
very, very well taken.
And I'll take it,
Our
and
governance and-
I'll just know that I haven't done it at all, and I'll try to get out, but it is, for me to do that, I'm leaving kids behind that I'm in charge of taking care of, and that's not,
Is
it's
your
possible.
summer schedule different than,
My summer schedule is a little bit different, yeah,
I'm just wondering, like,
it's a little more
I have
flexible.
a pretty flexible work schedule, right? Like, I could do 4 in a row if you then do some, like, we can work out something so
Yeah.
it
Yes, my
fits better
summers
with
are more
everybody's
flexible
schedule.
with that day, but it is that, when you punch a clock, somebody else is in charge of, like, it's not fully in my control if I can come, right? Somebody has to approve me leaving, and so, and that requires then, right, pulling in other people to cover, because I can't ever write new patients without this service that I
It's,
provide.
The last meeting, you had questions, they were on there.
But what Phil's talking about is coming in. I mean, I go through the,
invoices and
I go
stuff,
through
I mean,
the,
actually-
Right,
Stuff,
and
yeah.
that's the,
for sure.
really,
I do
that's,
that part.
I do
when,
that
when,
too.
when I do it, that's how I start. I get the thing as part of the board packet, and I go through line by line, and say, well, that one, let me make sure and look at that receipt,
Yeah.
double check. And after, and I've been doing it for, going on my 4th year now. So some of the stuff, I may not be looking at as closely just because it's been routine, like,
Right.
like an IE bill for one of our schools. Sometimes if I see a water bill up a little bit, I'll look and I'll say, well, I'll try and I have relayed that, was a toilet sticking or something
Yeah,
that way.
The first
But-
one of those I saw, I think I asked very specifically why the electric bills were so different.
Sure,
I don't do that anymore.
right,
Because I
right.
got my answer
But,
and
but,
I go. Now I
and
know why.
some things, it's contractual that we've passed in the back, and it's just, and now it's come up, and
Remind
it's
us.
something like that, but like Craig will say, an extra set of eyes, he welcomes it and everything that way, and I understand, and I think Sean's right on the point as far as seeing if there's a way to trade out times when it's busier. And I have tried to see if it's a type of a thing, if, someone's doing work in the building or over the holidays. I know there was one time I was talking with someone on the staff, and they're saying, well, I'm gonna be in this day, you could come in and do them then. It just didn't work out that time, but I know it is a challenge, but like I say, I'm just
Do we
encouraging.
have the signups for the rest of the year?
It's
That's, I
Is it-
think that's through Peggy and Kim. I don't know exactly who,
Because I wouldn't mind
who sends it
looking-
out and sets it
I
out.
wouldn't mind looking at the sign-up list.
Sure.
And seeing if I can, it's.
You should be doing it every 6th time.
Right.
Because that's how it was set up, right?
Right.
Phil's on there, and the other 6 are
But I wanna
rotated
be
through,
able to
but
see it though, so, I mean.
We can trade out.
Kim, can we get that list? I don't think
We
we-
took you off of it,
Maybe, yeah,
because you
because
couldn't do it.
I just couldn't, yeah, I mean, it's really,
It's hard. I mean, it's hard to schedule.
summertime I have a
yeah.
little more flexibility in afternoons.
But thank you, Phil, for doing it every meeting.
Yeah,
I volunteered for it, and I'm
No,
not trying to,
That is
to bring personal recognition upon myself as
No,
much
but-
as I appreciate
but
it.
your points are,
but,
your points
uh,
are very well taken around the due diligence, the extra set of eyes, and our responsibility, and we do not want to be a walkie, so,
Right.
and we won't.
And I like those cautionary tales
Yeah,
too,
I
because
do
it's
too.
important to be aware.
So thanks for raising that, it's a really good topic. Anything else on the norms?
we're still in the committee topic, right? I mean, I think at work sessions and ed committee, I think we've had really good conversations in those places. It's always harder when you're sitting up there to have good conversations, and I think when we're back here or ed committees at different schools and stuff, like, I think we do some of our best work. I think we do a lot of good active listening, and there's pretty good participation in those conversations. So I've enjoyed that part of it. And I think we've done a lot of good stuff there, so.
I think, and I think that has made the board meetings much smoother, much. We're not amending motions from the.
Steve, anything from you, or Chase, Kim, I mean, you watch us and are with us, any feedback?
Now, the only thing I would say is that over the last couple of months, I know in our small group meetings, we've had conversations, which I think I heard earlier when you were talking about trying to schedule time to do things like restorative justice work and things like that, about the footprint that being on the board places on your schedule. And I know we've had some individual and some small group conversations about how we organize our meetings and when they fall. So I know that one of the things that we've been trying to think about on our side of the house is where work sessions fall, where closed and exempt sessions fall, and where ed committee falls. And from an efficiency standpoint, is there a way for us to channel more of that work on the second and the fourth Tuesdays, so that the time commitment, and you know, in all honesty, we cast forward and think about elections and being an attractive place to do civil service, and you talked about that earlier, and we were talking about committees, and people looking at it and saying, ugh, that's an enormous footprint on my schedule. So, and I don't want to take, I'm looking at the time, so I'm very mindful of that, since you set aside 3 hours today, but I know that we've had some individual conversations about what a schedule might look like. If you're interested, I'd be happy to just put that together in a quick email and send that out to you for you all to take a look at, think about.
Sure.
That'd be great.
And see kind of what our thinking is on our side of the house, where we might help you do your jobs as effectively as possible, and try to balance your commitment to us and your commitment to those things away from school.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, I'll send that out to you.
Well, I think what Lori's comment about trying to do as much on
Yeah.
those nights, yeah, I'm a big one for that.
Lori talked
I
about
mean,
the last time we were here, too.
you know, when you first get into the board, it's like, okay, it's 2 Tuesdays a month, right?
Then you
Well,
find
don't,
out.
anyone who wants
Yeah.
to run for board, don't show them our boundary discussion schedule and all of those. But to that end as well, and like Sean was saying, and JP, ed committees are the ones that I enjoy, and the fact that that's that extra one, and you're at the school and those types of things, I think that one's very, very valuable and important and very rewarding. But yeah, as much as we can do on the 2 nights we commit to a month, I'm all for
I'll
that.
send a draft out for you to take a look at, because I've gotten individual feedback from folks over the last couple of months, so I'll put that together.
Super.
Anything else for the good of the cause?
And I don't know if this is, I think we need to discuss, and this came, I'll channel this into a finance committee discussion that I had with Craig. Just looking at how we're getting billed by Joe Holland, it's apparent that he's having more and more of his staff do work for him. And that I think it's, at some point in time, we need to have a discussion, since we've got time before that comes up for renewal, to explore maybe some other person to do that work, since we've got lead time that way.
So I know, I believe the strategy with Joe is to start bringing some other people in, so when he goes,
Well-
retires or whatever, he's got someone trained up and ready to, who understands our district and that kind of thing. I believe that was his approach by having, I've forgotten her name, she was.
Crystal.
Crystal, yeah.
Well, but, you know, we may be interested in looking elsewhere as well.
Yeah, sure.
So,
Yep, that's good.
and now that we have the time, it would be in order.
Good. Anything else? A motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, y'all.
I was watching.